Have you ever wanted to be a superhero? Well, who doesn't? Although we can't promise you superpowers, we can help you feel like a superhuman with our friends at Ascent Nutrition. Ascent Nutrition is making a huge difference in this community, and they have a new product that we absolutely love: pine pollen. Last year, several prominent scientists started speaking out about the power of pine trees and the benefits they can offer us. Ascent Nutrition offers raw, wild-crafted pine pollen. Pine pollen contains 200 nutrients in it, making it a true superfood. It's nature's highest source of phytohormones, which support hormone and libido health for men and women. Pine pollen also supports brain health, detoxification, as well as many facets of cardiovascular health. Their pine pollen is selling fast. It's literally flying off the shelves. Ascent Nutrition is on a mission of offering deeply transformative and helpful nutrients to as many people as possible to help bring about a great collective shift in human consciousness and human health. To order your pine pollen supply and check out everything Ascent Nutrition has to offer, use the link in the description or visit goascentnutrition.com and use coupon code FKN to get 10% off your entire purchase. Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Burch Driver. First, I have a couple of announcements. If you have a business and you want to advertise with Forbidden Knowledge News, email me, forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. We have unbeatable pricing and advertising packages. Definitely come check us out. Forbidden Knowledge News is always available on Rokfin, Odysee, Rumble, and all podcast platforms. Check out Rokfin. This is where you get all our premium content, as well as all the premium content from every creator on Rokfin for only $10 a month. You can also get access to all the free content from all the creators, including all our regular shows, for free. You just go to rokfin.com/FKN Plus to sign up. Click the link in the description. Our website is forbiddenknowledge.news. This is also the home of the Forbidden Knowledge Network. You're going to find amazing podcasts from our community there, so be sure to check that out. Today I want to welcome Burch Driver. He is a child of hippies, raised in the high desert of northern New Mexico. He is a nerd, jock, philosopher, and poet, just trying to find his way and doing something useful and having a good time doing it. He majored in physics at the University of New Mexico and also has a degree in industrial design from Art Center College of Design in Pasadena. His mode of operation is that the underdogs can rise to the occasion on any given day. We all have it. We all are immeasurably valuable. His podcast is Green Knight. Burch, welcome. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing, Chris? Thanks for having me on the show.
Of course. I'm excellent. It's great to talk with you again. And it was great having you over at the Forbidden Gathering. I had an excellent time, man. And this show that we're doing, I believe, is long overdue. I've been watching your podcast, and I really love the stuff you're doing. I love that you're a solutions type of guy with an attitude of, we know the corruption and evil and the deceptions. What do we do with the information? And that's what really matters, I believe. And I love what you're doing. I think we need more of this kind of solutions-based thinking in our community. That's why, I try to do a good balance between heavy topics and lighter stuff. But This is your first time on, man. Tell us more about yourself and what led you down your path you're on.
Well, I have kind of a different background. I think a lot of people, because growing up in the West and being the child of hippies, my dad was in Vietnam. When he came back, he did an about face on all of his thinking, basically, and moved my brother and I and my mom to New Mexico to join a commune. So we first couple of years there, we were on a hippie commune in northern New Mexico. So it's very interesting. All of that thinking from the hippie aspect, I liked for a lot of years, and I identified with it. I have come to terms with, that you can't really identify with anything, because once you identify, everything is transient, right? So you can't really hang on to anything. So, and what you find out is when you attach yourself to ideals or the ideology of something like the hippie movement, you end up running into contradictions. And so these kinds of contradictions are what I kind of like to point out and find interesting, because it makes it so that if you're in a tribe and your thinking is done for you, right? I will point out the contradictions, right? And so that's one thing that I've been doing since I was a kid. So I was always kind of a freak and an outsider in a way. And and so that's where I find myself here, but I think there's something urgent, like perhaps we'll make it through this, humanity, because in the past, every generation says, the world is ending, it's like there's someone out there on the street with a placard, or even like if you go all the way back, right? The Roman invasion of England, there's always something, and so, but I think, I don't know, there's something urgent about this time because of the technological advancement that we have, our mode of operation is competitive and adversarial, right? And it's my thinking that that's incompatible with our exponential technological expansion. And
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think that we have thought for a long time that we're in a very critical point. In fact, even as a kid, I used to just remember having these weird thoughts of, man, I wonder if I'm going to live through like an apocalypse or something. And to just have this, overwhelming just kind of knowing that something big is in the future. And, I believe that right now we're at the most critical point that we've been in a long time in human evolution. And there's a lot going on to sway us either way, which I want to get into for sure. But first, your podcast is called Green Knight. Tell us a little bit about why you named it that, and kind of the backstory.
Sure, yeah. So it's one of these stories that we're exposed to, like in the Western culture. But I don't know if you read it when you were in high school or in junior high or anything.
No, I did not. No, I did not.
So we went over it because my teacher thought it was important, but the big volumes of books have been written about this myth, Tolkien for one, and multiple other people. And despite it being a fairly simplistic story, it has all of the elements that I think are important for making a psychological transformation. So I think that the message behind the myth is still relevant, still there, and easily approachable. And so that's why I started it with that. And I wanted to get to the Green Knight like right in the beginning when I started, but I had to do all this backup. And so it became kind of this thing. It's like, how do you understand the the message of the myth, right? If you don't have the context of what it really means to be human, And so that's what I started to try to decide, if there was a way to pinpoint what it actually means to be human, And so I thought I figured it out, and not figured it out, but it's like a general idea, right? So it's not specific what it means to be human. So nothing's figured out. Like, I'm not saying like this is it, but I'm just saying that the message that I have to deliver is, it doesn't keep going, It's like, so that's what my podcast is. It's like it's a series, and it has an ending. And right now I'm bookending it with interviews to try to like see what people think of my own thought process and what I've been going through.
introduction into this thought process, because this is fascinating, and the way that you formed your ideals, it seems to be somewhat Gnostic and using Hermetic principles, and from what I've heard on your show, that's what I'm getting from it. But kind of explain to the audience from your perspective.
So Gnosticism, I think, is an important subject. I think a lot of people talk about it right now, and there may be some misunderstanding. And that's where just as a little side note, that's where I get frustrated a little bit. Is like we all want to argue over these little details, but maybe it's not so important. Yeah, and the Hermetic principles, I was aware of these, right? And when I first found out about them, it really was, it hit a chord with me because of my physics background. And to me, it was like, these are scientific principles, these 7 Hermetic principles. They're basically like the properties of waves, So the second principle is everything is vibration, everything is frequency, right? That's the second principle. And every other one of the principles is basically how waves behave. And so if you can come at it from this kind of like simplistic perspective, you can start to understand what the Hermetic principles are trying to teach,
Right.
And we can get into that. But just to say that the principles actually are related to the Tao, right? So for me, like when I had this like breakthrough when I was studying the principles, I was like, oh, it's like the Tao, right? Which is this 6,000-year-old Chinese tradition. And that's the Green Knight too. The Green Knight is like the Western version of the Tao. That's the story that it tells. And so if you wanted to get into that.
Yeah, I do. And, that's great because it's like a non-watered down kind of version of a true historical faith that kind of guides you down, I think, in a better direction than most spiritual practices and that I've heard so far. So I love some of these teachings. And whenever I first started hearing about it myself, I'm like, man, I've already implemented some of this stuff in my life and I didn't even know about it. And some of the most important ones you think for the audience?
Yeah, so I can just name them and then we can go through them, because I think a lot of times in these interviews we just start talking about each one and then so it's good to kind of put them all together in one's mind. And so the first one is the principle of mentalism, and we'll explain as we go through. Second one is I sometimes flip these, the principle of correspondence and the principle of vibration, right? Second and third. So I think it's actually principle of mentalism, principle of correspondence. Number 3, principle of vibration, everything is frequency. Number 4 is principle of polarity. Number 5 is principle of cause and effect. 6 is principle of rhythm, right? And the final one is the principle of gender, right?
Right.
So if there's any one of those that jump out at you that you want to start with.
Let's start with the first. I mean, we'll just go down the line. And what is your understanding of the principle of mentalism?
Yeah, so when I first discovered these, it corroborates one's like experiences and thinking if you're doing this kind of work up to the point when you find the Hermetic principles. And then when you find them, you're like, oh yeah, like that's a good way to say it, right? And so if you're doing these like spiritual practices, you're trying to figure out what it is to be human. Like first of all, it's like you abandon the idea that we're just flesh and bone and we're just physical and that's it, right? And so we can go with that right there. The principle of mentalism basically says that the universe itself, the entire cosmos, is mind, right? So the whole thing is actually the creator, I guess you could say, right? Mm-hmm. All these words are interchangeable here. So the way that this is a cosmology that comes from ancient Egypt, like pre-dynastic Egypt, pre-old kingdoms, like basically way the fuck back, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is the cosmology that comes out of Egypt. And so it's the principle of mentalism is basically that the universe itself is self-aware, mm-hmm. right? And the whole cosmos itself is it. And so it doesn't really have agency, right? Because itself is itself, right?
Yeah, and it's all part of our consciousness. It's all one, right? It's all part of us.
Yeah. Yes. And so consciousness comes first, right? Consciousness comes first, and then it is like the first measurement of whatever consciousness is. You can say that it's divided into a male and female aspect, or a trinity in effect. But anyway, what Principle of Mentalism says is that consciousness comes first, and then all of creation is a result of that first instigation to decide, basically, that the consciousness is like going to create something, right?
Right.
And so once it made that first measurement, it's like sacred geometry, right? It runs itself after that. And so it just plays out under these rules, plays out with the rules of the 7 Hermetic principles, basically. And the creator's hands are tied after that. And it is only in the way that sentient beings come into being is that the creator actually gets a chance to observe its own self, right? So Principle of Mentalism, basically, consciousness comes first. It's not a result of some kind of physical processes or accidental cosmic soup, that created these conditions that allowed a brain to exist. And so that's materialist sciences basically says that it's chemistry in action that creates consciousness, and that memories exist in the brain, and that once your physical apparatus is destroyed, then you are gone, and everything about you is gone. And we all know, right, in this community, that that's not the case. So does that cover?
Yeah, no, that was perfect. It kind of reminds me of the idea that, consciousness at one point was one singular, we could say, light that fractaled off into different pieces to experience, to grow, and at some point we have to return to that one source in one way or another, and I think that that's a beautiful way to look at everything's connection to the universe and our mind and consciousness. So yeah, that's a great explanation. Perfect. I know you use
Cool.
Principle of Vibration is your second one, right?
Yeah, so I like to use that first because we can start to understand is everything is waves, and this is corroborated and kind of proved in a way with quantum mechanics. And modern physics is basically says that our entire bodies, everything that actually feels solid, is mostly empty space. And so it's like really dense waves in a way, so we can understand that everything is actually made up of waves, that starts from the origin. And so if we can do that, then we can understand, if we're thinking about the properties of waves, the principle of correspondence completely fits with the way waves behave, because principle of correspondence is, another way to put it, is as above, so below. And we've all heard this, right? And so one way to understand it is like scale invariance. Like no matter how far in the cosmos we look, we see the same patterns. And no matter how in deep we look into physical matter, we see the same patterns, right? And so that's the principle of correspondence. Now, and waves exhibit that.
In this principle, do you think that vibration and frequency are the same, or is it something different, completely different?
Well, I think it's just another way to say frequency, because people say vibes, vibration is very common in the this spiritual way of thinking, right? It's like no good vibes only, all this vibration is frequency, right? It's just another way of,
Right.
Yeah. And it's like, just as a physical example, when you're underwater, or when you're in the air and you smash two rocks together, it just sounds like two rocks. You go underwater and there's bubbles, you smash two rocks together and it wants to break your eardrums, and it's because water is much more dense than air, and it transmits sound waves much more readily, more intensely. And so, yeah.
Now, how do we connect the principle of correspondence, and what is this to you?
Well, okay, so waves can no matter how small or how big, they exhibit the same pattern and the same interferences, right? So no matter what the amplitude or the wavelength of a wave, they exhibit the same as above, so below scale and variance that you can witness just by looking at nature, right? And so, yeah, if you just visualize, large amplitude, large wavelength waves interacting with each other create the same interference pattern, whether you're at small scales or large scales. And so correspondence works perfectly with waves, right?
Right on. And the principle of polarity kind of goes along with that same thinking of as above, so below, and it connects perfectly with vibration and correspondence.
Yes, polarity is for a wave, you can't have a peak of a wave without a trough, right? It's impossible. It's an impossibility, and this defines the other, right? For a wave, right? So we have the peak and the trough. There's no way to actually describe a peak without having it referenced next to a trough. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So there's no peak, no trough. They exist together. So it's like unity in disguise. This is what polarity is. And that's an easy way to visualize it, because we often think that polarity is the opposites, right? This is what we think. It's like light and day, right? Up and down, right? But there's no up if there's not down, right?
Right.
So you cannot define one without the other in these polar relationships. And this is what exists throughout nature in all these different fashions, right? With, positive and negative charge. It's like magnetism as well, right? It creates polar pattern. Positive and negative poles of a magnet are a perfect way to show it, right?
And so in a way, the frequency
so
can't evolve without the polarity.
Exactly. And so when there's a disturbance to a medium, for example, like we're like dropping a pebble in a pond, right? There's that initial transfer of energy to the medium, right? And the medium, because it's connected, right, it basically converts that energy into waves that go out, that propagate outwards, right? And so you drop a pebble in, it depresses the surface, then all of that energy brings it back up, right?
Oh.
So you have the depression and the explosion, and they both come together. You can't have one without the other. And then the emanating waves, right, are the troughs and the peaks as you go out.
Right on. Yeah, I love it. Let's talk about the principle of rhythm, one of my favorites. I'm a musician, and rhythm is a big part of my life, for sure.
Yeah. So I think polarity is like probably the most important one, because this is where we get into, because people often, when they're talking about polar relationships, they bring in good and evil, right? And so this is another thing, right, that you can't have one without the other,
right?
And so there's no good without evil, right? But this is a constructed polar relationship. This is in the minds of humanity, right? There is no required polarity between good and evil if you're not in civilization, right? The universe doesn't require good and evil to unfold out into its ever expanding presence, right? It's not one of these relationships that actually does anything in the universe. It's only our sensibilities that actually gives it what it is, but it still operates under the same rules, which is that good requires evil in order to be defined, right? So if you can't have all of this good without something to say, well, this is the contrasting element of that, right?
Right.
And so you need if you're in a homogeneous fucking medium, right, where basically everything's the same, there's no point of reference.
Yeah.
Right. So you can't even, and so all of this idea about like resist, going up against the opposition, it drives the pattern forward, right? It is just so like putting Trump up as this guy, right, for the left to hate, actually just now they're defined, the good side is defined by anti-Trump, right? And so is that good, or is that just anti something, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's really, this is where we get down into the nitty gritty, where it connects to the Tao, connects to the Green Knight, because it's talking about what real virtue is, you know? And so any human sensibility about what good is always going to be a construct based on our own sensibilities, our own experiences, our own thoughts, right? And so it's not a real thing.
Right. But in a way, it's kind of necessary in this realm that we're experiencing, in a way.
Well, what I would say is that it's a repeating pattern.
Okay. I see. It just kind of got stuck in there along the way.
It creates a polarity that actually drives it forward, but you always reach an impasse where basically society collapses for the most part, you know, and then it's rebuilt with the same pattern again. Right? So this is where I talk about Groundhog Day a lot. If you look at the history of humanity, you'll have fucking steady growth, right? And then collapse, and then steady growth, and then collapse, right? And so, and we always re-implement the same pattern again, right? So what I'm saying is that there's like this foundational way of seeing the world that actually allows the pattern to repeat. And so that's what it's like, just to say before we move on to the next things, because rhythm and cause and effect are very related to polarity and these same things that we're talking about. But I just wanted to get that in there, that it's like we always forget, right? That it's like really this resistance. If evil moves first and we move against it, then we're in the game, right? And now the game has started, right? And so the only way actually to create a new pattern, right, is to ignore.
Well, I don't know if we're going to get into this later, but is this something that we can break free of, do you believe, for any kind of future type of incarnations?
Yeah, I think that we're on the verge of doing it right now. And that's why I'm trying to get this out. Not like that it's anything that I have that's important, but it's something that's coming through me, and a lot of people are saying the same things. And we're all like, actually all of us in the community are saying this, except that we get bogged down on these little details, and then we'll end up in contradiction. And so there's no way to really resolve that except for to double down on your position, right? And then we're in these conflicts. We have this truth community that wants the truth, and then we're all brawling about these little details, you know?
Yes, you're right on.
So I'm saying that I'm actually optimistic that there's actually something that we can do, right? But it's and maybe we should get into it later, because it's kind of jumping
for sure. We'll get into that later.
But so
then we have the rhythm, principle of rhythm.
Okay. So in frequency and with waves, we understand that rhythm is a thing, right? Because if you just look at a waveform on an oscilloscope, I don't know if y'all know what that is. It's basically, you can just look at frequencies and it will show, right? And if you turn on the time frame where it's not a standing wave, you'll see that the peaks will go to the side and the troughs will replace, right? And so that it's a property of waves, basically, is rhythm, right? If you look at just the waves crashing on the beach, there's a time between them, right? There's a rhythm to these waves, right? Is this following for you from your musical sensibilities?
Yeah. No? Yeah, for sure.
And it's also your timing too on when you're playing music. It's like rhythm, guitar, and drums and bass are all like linked, right? And so, but this is all based on the timing of what you're playing. The rest of the notes have to fit in with the timing between, right? So it's basically when you hit that kick drum, you're right on the top of the wave, right? Or if you're reggae, then you're fucking in the trough, right?
Yeah, for sure. It makes sense.
Yeah. And so, the principle of rhythm is that if you declare a position as a human being, right? These laws are in effect when just from our thoughts and our behaviors, right? And so if you declare a position like, I am Well, I guess I'm going to use the liberals as an example. It's like they're declaring they think they have the moral high ground on this whole thing with the COVID and everything, right? Because they can identify what's bad, you know. But as soon as you declare a position, the opposition actually takes form, right? And so this is you can't basically say this is how it is without someone else saying actually not. you know what I mean?
Yeah, right. I mean, what other example can we give for a principle of rhythm on a kind of larger scale, so that we can give people a little bit more of an understanding? Because I'm still kind of grasping at this one.
Well, no, it's perfect actually. The two-party system, right? If you see back, we swing the pendulum swings, right? Right.
Perfect. Okay.
We'll get a long swing on Republicans with 2 terms of Reagan, right? And then we get the long swing back on Democrats, 2 terms of fucking Clinton, right? And so this is the principle of rhythm, right? And it's an artificial rhythm, right? Because they set us up to join these tribes, but it will transition. It will cyclically will cyclically transition to the other side. That's just how it is. That's just how it goes, right? So
we could fall back into it. Does
it's a pendulum swing.
So these artificial rhythms, if we kind of ignore those and pay attention to more of the natural rhythm of our planet and our resonance and our frequencies, we could go back to this more natural rhythm that we're a part of, right?
Yes, exactly, and that's exactly it. It's just that I think. Okay, so there's a root cause, right? So let's talk about cause and effect now, right? So the principle of cause and effect, right? So this is another polar relationship, right? There's no cause without effect and vice versa, right? So you can't have one without the other. Does this make sense? And it also relates to polarity and rhythm, right? So whenever you create a cause, there's an instant effect, and that's almost that balancing aspect, right? So when I was saying you take a position, you declare yourself as this, right? There's going to be that opposition that immediately forms or is already there. And you can even take a position based on opposing something, which is what a lot of people do, all this resist, bumper stickers, all this like fight back, right? It's just continuing the game. It's just the dance between polarities, this artificial polarity of so-called good and evil. And so cause and effect, right? I think there's a root cause because humanity, civilization is a pattern, right? That has a beginning, right? Just like the universe, you could say. Maybe time doesn't exist, but this retrocausality, right? When does the event happen that actually creates a cause, right? So with retrocausality, it's like, does the event, it's linked with the cause? And so it's like, you can't really have a positive time flow necessarily, theoretically, because the effect actually is causing the cause.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like kind of like watching a movie unfold, even though you already know the outcome, and it's just kind of playing out right before your eyes. And that's where it seems like we're kind of at right now with our whole system on the brink of collapsing. And we know it's coming. We know the economic system is going to crash. We know our financial system. We know the politicals. We know that this is coming, and it's like we're just kind of watching it play out and manifest as it should, right?
Yeah, and we know it's coming. I think for a lot of people who are blind, think this is some kind of organic shit that happens because we are really bad at managing our civilization. But this whole thing about cause and effect is like, when I say black moves first, like when evil moves first, right? And we respond, right? Then we're in the game. And so now it's playing, right? And now the pattern has begun. And so
it's like a chess game that's already been won,
Yeah, but they're asking us, right? They're basically asking us to respond, right? Like we're gonna do something really fucking heinous. It's so obviously fucking heinous, right? Evil moves first. Evil always moves first, right? And
Yeah.
it's designed. It's a design move in order to get a response, right? So none of this shit, none of this supply chain action is fucking organic, right? We all, yeah, we can see it coming because we're fucking idiots. Humanity are fucking retarded, right? But actually, it's being done to us so that it'll put us into a position where we have to accept the offer from quote government, with for lack of a better word, from authority, right? The authority, right? So they set up a situation that is so heinous that we have no choice but to accept the solution, right? And so this is that problem action solution that Ike talks about, which is basically another way of saying the Hegelian dialectic, you know, or a false dichotomy, right? Both mazes lead to the same cage. It seems like we're opposing a side, but we're both define each other, and we're being manipulated into an outcome, right?
Yes, man.
And so all of this response, it's like we got to respond, we got to do something, you know, we got to do a thing, and all of that just you know, turns the wheels, right? And gets us closer to these three eventualities that are possible, right?
Yeah. That's why, I mean, like, one of the huge answers is not participating, going on your own timeline, worrying about yourself and your growth and your spirituality and where you're headed, and it breaks a cycle. It tension out of nowhere anymore. I think that's one of the many answers that we could possibly get into.
Yeah, and it's really, I think the reason, for me, it's like 6,000 years, right? This has been going on. Like after the fall of man, we were given an offer for civilization and we accepted it. And it's in the fable of the Bible, the Garden of Eden, all that shit is like basically the fable of us deciding to leave nature, right? And join an artificial rhythm, you know?
Right.
And that's actually, I go into it, it's like, this is actually the definition of sin, right? Sin semilla, right? That's a Spanish word for no seeds, like without seeds, right? Sin actually is without, right? So it's going without, separating yourself from quote the divine or nature, you know. And so to me, that's where it all started, right? And the root cause is the way that we perceive what it is to be alive, right? And I mean, we can get into it. I don't want to like.
I want to talk about the aspect of the nature of our reality when it pertains to, are we on a prison planet? Is it something we created for ourselves that we agreed to, like you just said, or is it a place for consciousness evolution? I do want to get into all of that, but I do want to cover the last principle of gender first. I think this is a really important one to go over for sure.
Yeah, and it's probably the most difficult one to deal with, especially these days where they're trying to homogenize the population, you know, like make everyone same sex. Like that may be hard for some people to fucking hear, but I know you can understand it
for sure.
And I wasn't always this way, you know. I was like Earth First tree hugger in '99, you know, like I was on that side, and I did a full about face after fucking 9/11. But yeah, so the principle of gender, right? So, and it's another polar relationship, right? They can't exist without each other, you know. And wherever you look in nature, you see these gender relationships, right? And so we can come up with all kinds of examples, but I like to talk about the Trinity, which is like the origin of the universe. And we can say that maybe time doesn't exist, but it to me, there's an origin because originally consciousness decided to do it, right? And so whether that can be marked at a time and location, I don't know. It may not be that once it starts, it's actually possible. So, but like to me, I'm of the notion that the cosmos is large and it is big. Like we are not on a plate, you know.
Yeah.
And so if you think of the void, right? The void is actually a female. It has a female connotation because anything can kind of take seed in the void, right? So it's like the womb of the cosmos, right? We have the void. That's the female aspect. And we have consciousness actually intending to make the first measurement, which is like the viscous piscis, where they basically find a point and then put two circles overlapping, right? And then if you repeat this, you get the flower of life, the seed of life, right? And then you get the flower of life. And then if it continues, like this is how the cosmos, to my mind, is like started. And this is the pre-Egyptian fucking cosmology, is basically that it's sacred geometry, right? It all starts from the flower of life, and all of the platonic solids can be created, right? Which is, the platonic solids are basically the shapes that the elements take, can be created with this flower of life symbol if it's just perpetuated, right? So it's like, so what I was getting at is that the female aspect is the void, right? The male aspect is the conscious intent, right? And the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, right? The Holy Ghost is female, right? Father, and the Son is the outcome of the intention, right?
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, you can see that it's like gender is like right there in everything, like not just in nature. You can see it everywhere. It's like that's how species are propagated and all that stuff. But then also in our minds too, like we have this left hemisphere and right hemisphere, right? The right hemisphere is like the void, where intuition, I'm paring this down, this explanation, and the left is like the measurement side, right? The male side and the female side, right? And if you're going to be a whole person, you don't want to be imbalanced on either side, And one thing that Mark Passio explained to me, and I thought it really fucking made sense. He goes into etymology a lot, which I think is really important, which is the history of word definition. And he just breaks down individual, the word individual, in, not, divided, dual. So not divided, dual, right? So we have dual hemispheres, but to operate whole, we need to be not divided,
Yes, man. I love it. Now, what do you think their idea, when I say them, they, those, the elites, their idea of a utopia is? You mentioned, they're trying to homogenize us, get rid of the duality of sexes, and basically plug us into a technological reality that they call the metaverse. I think that's one of the outcomes. But what do you think is the whole big idea of their ideal utopia when it comes to the direction they're trying to steer us with all the agendas and bullshit?
Yeah, so I think that they're parasites, right? They're not predators, they're parasites. They're feeding off of everyone else, right? It's a kind of a different class of people. So their intent is actually to set up a system that makes it so that they can feed forever, And, it's like, I want to break it down a little bit and talk about the Gnostics, because a lot of people say it's like, oh, about the Demiurge and the Gnostics and all this, right? Right. The Demiurge supposedly created the cosmos. Like that's the way we interpret what the Gnostics think today, right? And for me, it's like the Demiurge actually installed the matrix in our mind, right? This is the root cause. And so when Gnostics talk about we got to get out of the matrix, we got to escape this place, it's like, no, we don't need to escape this place. We need to escape the matrix that has been set up in our minds, this construct, right? This false reality and it's just like the way money has value because we all agree, right? This false construct also is real because we all agree that it's real, but it's just fake. It's based on this false polarity. And so I just wanted to get that out, is like that the Demiurge didn't create the cosmos. It actually simulated the creation to us, like maybe perhaps 6,000 years ago. It's like, I have no idea. It seems like there's an entity that's trying to become a god because it can't abide the rules of the universe. It can't abide not being a top dog, or it can't abide, And so it's like the only way to do that is to take over a collective consciousness,
And I found it interesting, the idea that you were saying that we kind of agreed to be a part of this at some point as a collective, maybe a collective conscious or an entity at some point. What do you think? Can you maybe expand a little bit on that?
Yeah. I wanted to answer your other question first, which was, what do you think they're trying to do by creating this digital cage? And yeah, and I think that's what it is. It's the ultimate method, because they have our minds, right? And when they say we're born into sin, it's like we're born into this false reality, right? And so each generation is actually signing up again without ever realizing that it's an offer, right? That they don't have to accept the offer. So the purpose, right, is actually to create a system that actually runs itself, right? Basically automate the system, so you don't have to always do this maintenance on these minds, you know, or this constant like bombardment of, you know, propaganda or conditioning, right? And so yeah, it's like conditioning. The people talk about the human condition like it's our nature, but look at that word. It's a condition, right? It's a condition. It is removable. It's treatable or curable, or it's something that's placed on top of us, you know. And so the purpose of this, what they're trying to do, right, is to get us all in this cage so it basically runs itself, you know? And they don't have to do these constant maintenance. Man, it keeps the population at a constant rate and all of this shit, like, you know.
Man, it makes me think of this like massive celestial entity with just control over everything. It's like a simulation or a video game for him. He'll just pop in and do some maintenance here and there, and he's just tired of doing that, so he wants to automate everything. And that's a scary thought, that we're just some kind of like ant farms for this, you know, grand intelligent celestial entity. But I don't know. It's it makes too much sense at times.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at it like this, and if you think about it, right? We're going against our nature. We were captured almost like a parasite gets captured, like an ant gets that fungus in the brain that makes it crawl up to the top of the tree.
Yeah.
Just stand there until the fungus spores.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like we got infected, and it's like it's a mind virus. And now we're furiously building for the last 6,000 years to get to the technologically level of advancement. It's like the whole plan was to get here so that it could basically have a home for life forever.
Now
it's like we've been building furiously for 6,000 years. It's almost like something took over our minds and it's like making us build this. Like, why are we doing it? You know?
Well, that leads us to the question of, we all want to believe, many of us in this community at least want to believe that we have spirit guides or angels or ancestors or entities beyond this construct that are guiding us and helping us along the way. I know I've had what I consider contact experiences with what I currently understand as my spirit guides, but that could change tomorrow if I gain a new understanding of it. But as for now, that's what I see it as. What do you think? Do you think that it's just us in a way? It's our own consciousness trying to evolve ourselves by showing us something maybe we can grasp and understand? Or is it something outside of that? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it might be both those things, right? And I totally agree with that. There is this unseen aspect of reality, right? That it is very part of our reality. And I think we've been conditioned to ignore it, you know? And yeah, I think it's the spirit realm, or wherever you want to call it, the other side, it's definitely populated, you know? But whether or not our higher selves are like trying to reach us, or our higher selves are actually in this body, right? And so like when we come down here, it's like we're in here, and we're kind of separated. But I don't know, a lot of people talk about your higher self trying, you know, when you're meditating, it's like you're like more in tune, you shut down thinking, right? Or it could be your spirit guides, or, you know, it's like I don't really know. I just know that there's some kind of faction out there that wants us to break this, you know?
That's what I was just going to ask. Do you think there's like competing factions of, whether it's, you know, humans, highly advanced humans, or something else that has different ideas of what they want out of humanity, and they're trying to pull different strings in different directions? Some might even have our best interest in mind. I don't know, you know? It seems like there is a lot of different warring factions out there that have different ideas of the outcome to whatever's happening right now with all the chaos.
Yeah, I mean, if you talk about Earth as a school, you know, it's like this. It's a much harder school now that it's been infected by a parasite. You know, and so it's almost like it's our humanity's assignment is not necessarily individually to break free from here, you know, to like do the work that is required while you're living to actually not come back, you know, to not be obligated to come back. But I think it's actually all of us together that we're supposed to do that. We're supposed to clear this thing together, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I love it how Hollywood and the media. Oh no, I just want to say I love it how Hollywood and the media over the movie magic in Hollywood have been portraying this hero's journey and kind of getting back to a spirituality, and the, you know, the horror movies with a technical takeover and sci-fi movies where we're enslaved to the government, and they've been just showing us these ideas of what's really behind our reality this whole time in fiction movies. And it makes me wonder again, are there, you know, elite factions at high levels that are involved with seeding our consciousness to evolve us through the media and movies, and, you know, even clandestine groups that are on social media trying to influence conspiracy theories and talk of Gnosticism, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You could talk about the revelation of the method. It's getting more and more intense, I suppose, these days. Mm-hmm. But people say they stop watching content like, studio produced content because it's so woke now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, you just realized it was woke.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, it's always been there.
Way the whole time.
Right.
Yeah. If you look back at these old movies from the 40s and shit, it's the same shit going down.
Well, it was always the propaganda for the times. You know, whatever the agenda was, it was always in the background of movies or media.
And they would show you the corruption, and they would show you a hero trying to fight the corruption, mm-hmm. right? And like, but the corruption just stays. They'd show you how corrupt it is, but they show a hero trying to take it down. But in reality, it's like we were just telling you what we're doing.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, this is another kind of sign of the times that we're in where, like you said, it does appear that the facade of a lot of our entertainment industry is crumbling. People don't pay attention to celebrities as much anymore. Netflix's numbers were absolutely awful the last time I checked. And people are tuning out. People are tuning out of Hollywood, and they want to find alternative sources of entertainment, real sources of entertainment. I mean, Hollywood's not even trying to supply good actors or quality anymore. It's become just purely about the agendas and propaganda behind whatever they're showing you, and nothing, not even about making money anymore. I don't think it's just about, you know, following whatever orders they've been given to propagandize us, and people are checking out. They don't want to see it anymore. They want to see real stuff. A lot of people. That's why I'm really happy about people listening to podcasts and the amount of new people that are coming out with podcasts. And there's so much to choose from and so much great information out there. But there's also an infiltration on the other side of people trying to muddy the waters in you know, these sections and communities, and that's why you have to go by your gut instinct for so much of this information, right?
Yeah. So it's like you gonna know or you want to believe, right? And so joining a tribe and having your thinking done for you is a belief, right? But how is it really possible to know? You know. And so, I mean, Ryder said you got to use your intuition, and I agree with that. It's like, I think that there's maybe a more poignant way to say it, but like, that's basically it.
Yeah. You
can't just take someone's fucking content and accept it. You have to like look into it, and you have to feel it, you know? And for me, like, I've been able to do that for a long time, and so I can watch content. I'm really everything sucks, you know. It's like everything is really bad, like as far as like production value, right?
Yeah.
For the most part. But I still get into it, and I like to, you know, as an art form and stuff, people just living their lives, dude. They don't even know what's happening, right? We have these wonderful cinematographers, man, and fucking so good at what they do, and they're just fucking clueless, man. And I don't know if waking people up is really the thing. I don't know if we have to learn the hard way, you know. And that in the past is the only way that we ever learned, you know. And I would like it so that we don't have to. We can fly off of this cliff instead of fall, you know.
Yeah,
that's one thing they say.
Well, let's.
But one thing you wanted to say about like what it is, like why we're here, and maybe there's these outside entities that want to help us, right? And so I think that we actually, that what reincarnation is actually when we accept the offer, that's when reincarnation starts, right? Is because we've actually broken the laws of nature, and now we're get stuck in this loop until we figure it out, you know. And so these other entities cannot get involved, and if they do, then they're in the karma loop, right? And so we probably have some entities that have come in and try to help us, and now they're here and they can't get out, you know. And so the only way to clear this shit, like, we're not supposed to just fucking suffer and die. Like, actually, previous, like 100,000 years ago, or maybe 50,000 years ago, there was a worldwide civilization, and they could move rocks around like no problem, you know. And they could do all kinds of crazy shit with stone, and they build all the sacred geometric structures. And, you know, the human body has this power, right? We're only using 10% of our mind, but maybe we're only using like 10% of our entire apparatus. You know, it's like, we don't need technology. Like, the technology is us. And so when I say there's something to be done, it's really hard to come at, because there's nothing to be done, because we are just right. All we have to do is negate, right, what is false.
Yeah.
And how to do that, right? And so you have to come at it from a general perspective, like what it is. We can't say what this is or how many different ways they're trying to fuck us, you know. It's numerous ways, right? And to resist this or to resist that is just falling into the game, you know, because they have that all dialed. And armed resistance is silly. It's like, they're trying to take the guns away right now. It's like, even with an AR-15, yeah, you could have a full-on guerrilla war, you know. But is that where we want to go? Is that where we want to go? You know, it's like, commandos think they can fuck up the government with an AR-15 and some grenades. Yeah, maybe. But it'll take a fucking long ass time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, let's talk about that. What are the best solutions that people can look towards? And, you know, I the things that I can offer you is, you know, non-participation in any bullshit, seeing through the lies, going off your intuition, like you said, going off your gut, and paying attention to you and your own spiritual growth, and don't give a shit about what everyone else is doing or what the news is telling you or social media or anything else, and stop poisoning yourself with the food you eat and the water you're drinking, and try and get to a better environment for yourself. Don't put yourself in toxic places or places that are horrible environments. And, you know, I think that is a good step in the right direction. But what can you offer people if that, you know, that want to get off this matrix?
Yeah, I mean, all of the practical things are absolutely essential, like to reduce our dependency, right, on on the authority, right? So all of that is absolutely essential. But when I talk about the root cause, I think it's like the way we see the world. It's the way that we perceive what is valuable. It's like how we define value. I think that's what it really, really comes down to. And we have an inverted sense of what value is right now. And people have talked about it forever. And so it's like hard to talk about, because you say these words and people are like, yeah, I've heard that before. It's like, but what does it do to say those words? Like, absolutely nothing. So it's like, it's really this psychological transformation that is required. And so the word I want to use is like the scarcity value of model, right? Scarcity value of model, which is supply and demand. Supply and demand is the scarcity value model, because the value of a limited supply goes up when the demand goes up, right? The value of supply goes up when the quantity of supply goes down, right? And so this creates an automatic competition for what's left, you know? And so the way we see the world is, I better get what's mine before someone else takes it, you know? And this creates the pattern that we find, right? Because we're still human beings, we have to exchange to live, right? We're all specialists. We all we could all go off grid and do all that shit, but we still are human beings, and we would still need to like each other. We still need to make stuff. We still need tools, you know, we still need all of this stuff. And so it comes down to the exchange, right? That's how we live, right? And right now the exchange is taken over, and all of our life's blood is extracted from us. And so to really understand what value is to understand that it's actually not a diminished supply. Like, supply and demand only serves the owner of the supply. And who is that, right? Who owns the supply of life? Why is it that there's a limited supply of life?
Yeah.
You know, and who's getting paid to sell that shit to us? You know, and so if you think about what supply and demand is, fucking so stupid, man. And that's what our whole economy runs off of. They act like it's complex, but it's just based off of that. It's just based off of how much supply, how much demand, which is a popularity index, you know? And so this is how we define value. And what this does is, like, it's me against the world. It's me and mine against everyone else. And so we start from this pattern again every time, the Groundhog Day. We wake up again, we start again. It's me and mine.
Right.
And so it's actually, that's the inverse of that is actually the truth, is that because we are creative species, we're a technological species, right? Value is only increasing, right? The price of products should be going down because we're getting better at manufacturing the value, right? But they're just fucking going up, right? And so this is all to create a situation in this next couple of months where we're going to have to accept this offer because shit's going to get gnar, you know, and they're going to set it up for us like that. So what you do is is to understand that value is actually unlimited, right? And that if everyone participates, we only fucking spike the creation of value, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's only adding to the pool. And so if someone who wants to own a supply, that doesn't work for them. That doesn't work for them because you can't raise the price when demand goes up. There's a never ending fucking supply of demand. Right?
Right.
So it's just an inversion of value. So it's like, basically you decide that that value is unlimited, right? And that if it's actually a better survival strategy to make sure everyone around you is okay, right? And not just to make sure you're okay.
Right. I think part of that is also kind of establishing or reestablishing this global consciousness connection that you alluded to earlier, that we were at one time this advanced civilization that had great consciousness abilities and probably psionic abilities and abilities to communicate other way beyond what we do now. If we could somehow reestablish that, maybe we might realize how important each other are and how connected we are and how we really need each other to grow and move forward, right?
Yeah. And I think that it's like a mental switch, right? That when in any of these situations where it comes, it's like, well, I better get mine, then actually do the other thing, you know?
Yeah.
Because you're not going to die, right? In society, everyone walks around like their sense of psychological self, their ego, is their life, right? But in society, your life isn't in danger, right? Only your status is in danger. And so we're all fighting for status. And really, we're all infinitely valuable. Like, if we could create, for my idea for solution is, first, invert your idea of what value is, right? It's not a diminished supply, and it's not a popularity index, right? That's how crypto works, right? More people that buy in, the more valuable it gets, right? It's still the same bullshit, right? It's still a fiat currency. It's not gonna unless we can change the way that we perceive what value is, it's not gonna do shit, right? And it's all being fucking manipulated against us right now too. This dive and climb and shit. We're being massaged, man. We're being massaged.
Yeah.
So I mean, I would say yes. First, it's understanding what actual true value is. The exchange is how we live. So we want to maximize and facilitate the exchange to the nth degree, right? And yeah, I mean, so that's what I'm working on. An infrastructure that permits everyone to participate, and outside of this stratified structure that only permits certain members of society to participate, right? And so yeah, right now all of our products are designed by a few people, right? And right? And so perceived value can be manufactured, right? So if something seems valuable, all you have to do is get enough people to follow it, right? So it's like marketing budget, right? So you can create value by just creating a popularity index, and this is all fake.
Yes.
You know,
yes,
we're
man.
all in this together. We're all in this together. There's no hierarchy in it. We have what it takes to actually get in a position where we can create a positive outcome. But it's like we can't be afraid. I think the hack is to not be afraid to die. You know?
Yes, man. I think you're spot on. I love it. Love it. Man, we definitely have to do this again in the future. For the audience that wants to find out more about you, where they find your podcast and anything else you got going on?
Yeah. So the podcast is, I recommend listening from the beginning, because I had an idea of like understanding the way our technology changes us, right? I think that most people take this for granted. I'm an industrial designer, and when I say I'm an industrial designer, people are like, what the fuck is that? And I was like, well, everything you see around you was designed by a person, you know? And so what I was getting at is that what was I saying?
Podcast, where we can find it. Yeah. You were saying they need to listen from the beginning.
Yeah. The first 4 or 5 episodes are an introduction to Marshall McLuhan, who is a media quote guru from the 60s and 70s. And his message, he never was really understood. He became really popular. But if you start to look into him, you can really understand the psychological effects that our technology has on us, especially radical innovations such as the internet or radio or the printing press. All that shit changed the world forever and all time, you know?
Yes.
So I started in with that because I think that's really important to get to the idea of like manufacturing the stuff we make. That's how we exchange, right? We exchange through services and through making stuff. And so that's who we are, right? That's what we do. We're not going to get away from that. Mm-hmm. So we can create a free exchange, right? That's what I want to do, create a free exchange where it's basically, we all know that we exchange, that's how humans live, but this exchange is corrupted. So instead of trying to fix this and expunge the parasite, we just jump to a new infrastructure, like all at once. All of us, wait for the right time, and then we're gone, and we can exchange with each other because that's how we live, you know?
Right on.
And so that's the idea. But I wanted to get to that in my podcast, and so it's green night, like as in night of the round table. All one word, all lowercase, .green, right? Not .com. And you start from the beginning, and I get to the end, and I'll probably continue. I'm putting these interviews that I've been doing over the last 2 months up there, and then I have one more kind of commentary on credibility. And so I don't know if you want to talk about that next time, that would be good, because it's like a whole conversation. I think it's a way to talk about what.
Yeah, maybe you could give us like an introduction for a teaser for next time.
Yeah, well, I just say that credibility is a logical fallacy, right? So we want to look at credible sources and think, oh, they're telling the truth because they have the background, they have the experience, and they've done all of the work, and they have the credentials, blah, 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 right? But a credible source can lie.
Yeah.
And that's actually a principle of logic, right? Is that information, the veracity of information is independent of source. Right. And so just keep that in mind when you're trying to figure out who to listen to. Right. This is branding, y'all. Right. So let your branding be your information. Right. If these guys that you're listening to are can really fucking put it out there, like they're very articulate. Right. Really listen to what they're saying and try to dig in on what it is, the core of their message. Right. And then I think we can find some good shit there, you know.
That's great. Awesome, man. I love it. We'll definitely have to do this again in the future. Is there anything else that you're working on or that you'd like to plug for the audience?
Well, I have my jewelry. I'm an industrial designer. I have an idea to build an infrastructure I've been working on for 20 years. So if like some of you all are out there, you're like working on the same shit as me, and you guys want to team up, then let's do it, you know? And this is creating the new exchange, create and fixing manufacturing.
Awesome.
Right? And to do that without it getting corrupted, if we're going to create a new organization, we have to change our condition, right? So any new organization will be corruptive unless we can change the way we see the world, you know?
Awesome, man. I love it. Well, I'm going to have all the links there in the description for the audience to easily access it. Burch, thank you again, man. That was fantastic, and we'll definitely do it again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, dude. I love your show, and we'll
Thank
talk
you.
soon.
Definitely. Until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We will talk again tomorrow. See you then.